Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
Channel 7 News and Public Affairs presents the award-winning program Florida Forum, now in its 22nd year, examining the issues and personalities that affect our area. Here is your moderator, Mark Wolf.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Our guest this afternoon is the senior U.S. Senator from Florida, Democrat Lawton Chiles, joining us on the forum along with our panel of Tom Fiedler, political editor of the Miami Herald, and News Center 7's Mark Ludner. Senator, delighted to see you.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to be back with you.
We have a lot of big policy questions to talk about, what with the budget coming down these days on Capitol Hill. But if you forgive me, I'd like to get it underway with a little bit of talk about politics. Tomorrow the president comes to town, keynoting what is supposed to be a dinner that's going to raise $1 million for the junior senator from Florida, Paula Hawkins, in anticipation of her re-election campaign in '86 against, presumably, everybody says, Governor Graham. How do you see this contest shaping up and shaking out?
Well, let me say to start with, I'm a little bit jealous of this dinner and $1 million that they're talking about. The most I've ever spent in a campaign is $800,000, and at $100 a whack, it takes a long time to raise it. $1 million in one dinner, that's too much. But I understand that both sides are talking about spending $8 million apiece, so I guess there's still got to be some fundraising after this. The cost is just mind-boggling to me. Where are we going to stop with this? I mean, it's just...
Where does the cost come from? Last time you ran, you said you spent about $800,000. Now the price tag is about 10 times that amount. How come?
Well, a lot of it is what we pay in your shops, I guess you could say, what the television costs are. But you know, it just more and more we're on this chain mill. The campaigns last longer and longer. We go to more and more of the saturation coverage. Florida, because it has more people, the media does cost tremendously more if you look at what the bill has cost. And somehow we've gotten away from this ability that we're going to campaign on a person-to-person basis, and it's all done via the television and the bombs that are hurled. It's almost like Star Wars.
Well, without digging too deeply into the high cost of television time these days, I want to press you on the question of how you see Hawkins versus Graham shaking out.
Well, I think it is going to be a very close race. I think that Senator Hawkins has improved her image very much in the last couple of years, and certainly her recognition factor. I think it'll be very close. Also, she has going for her the fact that you know, there has been an upsurge for Republicans. I think it'll be close. I still think Graham will win. I think it's going to pit two good candidates against each other. Both will be very well financed. Both, if anything, Graham will have a better grassroots organization, and a governor should have at the end of 8 years. I think it'll be a close race. I pick Graham to win.
And forgive me for pointing out the obvious, but you will vote Democratic.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom Fiedler.
Let me pick up there on the upsurge in the Republican Party's strength. That it's evident here in Florida. But as it relates to you, you have been active along with a number of other Democratic office holders in setting up this Democratic Leadership Council. You were here just 2 weeks ago in an introductory visit in North Florida. But that's been a bit rockier than you may have anticipated. I understand that in some corners it's now being regarded derisively as the white man's caucus because of the lack of minority representation, sensitivity to women's issues.
It's interesting. Again, Tom, that's what gets picked up. And I think there have been those that, for their own special reasons, have wanted to dump on the group that we were starting. I can't tell you how enthused I was with the reception that we received in our first foray into Florida and our first trip into the hinterlands, actually coming out into the countryside. I'm delighted that they picked Florida, and I think they did because it is a microcosm of the nation. It is a state that's on the front line with all of its problems, and it is a state that has a strong Democratic state party. But the meetings with the Democratic legislators in Tallahassee, they were tremendously enthusiastic. They wanted to be a part of it. We had a meeting in Tallahassee and Tampa in which we invited business people from around the state. We had 250 people show up just to fly in or to come in for a noon luncheon, and they were people that were representative of agriculture, banking, insurance, you know, sort of the gamut, and they came from West Florida to South Florida, and they were so hungry for the message that we were bringing that we're a bunch of young pragmatists that call ourselves problem solvers, not hung up on ideology one way or the other, and we're determined to move this party.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but the trick will be moving the party into an area that perhaps they're more comfortable with, into the middle of the road, without abandoning the groups like
Well,
blacks,
that's interesting
women.
because we had a question from the black state representative in Tallahassee, and he said he had a concern, and I think it's a very legitimate concern. What does this mean when you move to the middle?
Exactly.
What does that mean to we blacks who have been stalwart, who have been the one group that sort of stayed with the party? What does that mean to us? And I think we could certainly tell him that it does not bode anything wrong, anything that will be against their interest. That basically what we're saying is if something is wrong, let's find a way to right it. But if we've got a program that we created years ago that isn't working, let's don't be afraid to say that program's got to go and let's find a better way. And we, if you look at the budget that some of us put together, that's a budget that has growth and has education as a major feature, job training, trying to do something about featured jobs. And I think where the Democrats were getting in trouble is we were talking about dividing up the existing pie, or that was the message that was coming from Mondale. Let's take some of what you've got, divide up the existing pie, and give to those that have not. That's not the message of Roosevelt or of any others. It's let's build a bigger pie. And when we talk with Dick Gephardt and we talk with the people that we have, you know, in our group, we're talking about how do we get this country going again. And we're talking about education, we're talking about jobs. The interesting thing is we have a lot of blacks that we do have blacks that belong. Bill Gray, who is now the celebrity in Washington, having passed in the Democrats the budget, is a member, is very enthused about what we're doing.
I want to interject here for the viewers who are watching us who are not familiar with the Democratic Leadership Council. That's an organization started by Lawton Chiles and some others in an effort to move what Senator Chiles and others consider the Democratic Party a little bit more close to center as opposed to the left of center. And
well, that's right. Just having us be a mainstream America and have us speak to the problems, really going back to what the Democratic Party has sort of stood for in the past. A strong defense, concerned about fiscal policies, so having a balanced budget, but also concerned about the plight of people and recognizing that government does have a role to play. I think we're totally different. Somebody said you're getting more like Republicans. Not at all. The Republicans under Ronald Reagan and otherwise say there's no need for government. Let's tear it all down. We think there is a need, but let's have government that works.
that's the Democratic Leadership Council, and this is Mark Ledner.
Senator, late this past week, the President said that the House-passed budget was unacceptable to me and to the American people. Now, where are we going? The House wants to freeze defense spending and allow Social Security to rise. The Senate voted a budget which is precisely the opposite. What's going to be resolved here?
Well, what's going to be resolved, I think, in the conference is the Senate and the Republican-passed budget we had there had a one-year freeze on the cost of living index for Social Security and all of the entitlement programs. The House left that out, and they went to a lower number on defense. So the Senate had a zero growth for defense, but they provided inflation. The House did not. I would say that the way it looks to me, Social Security, the COLA freezes will be dropped from the budget. I think in some ways what that means, and I don't know whether there'll be some split on where we are in defense of part of the of cost of living go up, but what that means is the package that comes out of the House and Senate will be smaller in numbers, than either side had going in. And in a way, I think the tragedy of this thing, to me, is the Congress was very willing to vote for major spending cuts. And both sides did. Both houses did vote for major spending cuts in almost all of the programs. We protected just certain programs of the very poor, the people that couldn't deal. A majority of certainly of the Senate, and I think even some expressions on the House, were willing to do something even in the entitlement programs if the package was fair, if the package shared the pain with everyone, and if there were some revenues in the package. The President, if he would only come into the trenches now and provide some leadership, could put together a package that could give us a balanced budget by the year 1990. It would do more for this economy than anything in the world, and he would simply have to agree that there can be some revenue. He could even make the spending cuts all be first. But if he agreed that there could be some revenue in the mix, that opens the door for being able to provide more spending cuts even, and towards getting a pattern that you truly can get this deficit to balance. What we're going to come out with is a deficit 3 years from now that's going to be over $100 billion, probably $150 billion under the Congressional Budget Office figures, and it's too bad because it will be a major effort, and there will be a lot of spending cuts, but it will not be enough. Interest rates will still be going up, and the economy will still be in trouble. The dollar will still be high. The trade deficit will be high. And it's tragic because with a little more help and putting together some revenues, as I say, we could get a package that the market would react to like crazy, that people would be able to make their plans for, that I think would really help the trade deficit because because interest rates would come down, the dollar would ease down the proper way, not going off because of a panic. That may not be too late for that. Maybe when we come out of the conference with this number, we can still get the President on board. That's what we desperately need.
But Senator, if the President were in this studio with us right now, he'd say, look, interest rates are coming down. They're lower than they've been in years. The stock market is higher than it's ever been. The economy is growing. That's where the new revenue is coming from.
He would say all of that, and that's been part of our problem too. How do you get people to take this major pain in the programs if the President says we're going to grow our way out of this? But the other side of that is interest on the national debt is $143 billion this year. That's half of the total defense budget. It's 8.5 times what we pay for education. It's 1.5 times what we pay for all health programs. It's the fastest growing program of the federal government. It's a Pac-Man that is eating up everything else. The trade deficit is going to be over $140 billion this year. How does that affect us? It affects us because it means jobs in this country are going overseas. We're not going to have any manufacturing in this country. We can't be just a service country. We're finding our major manufacturing employers are saying we're going to have to produce in Taiwan, or we're going to have to build whatever we're selling in Korea. We'll sell it in this country, but we won't put it together here. That is jobs. That's tragic. And what that means, if you ask Paul Volcker or anyone else, is that we are locking in a lower standard of living in future years in this country. Now, what Paul Volcker will tell you is, I can't tell you what year. He said, I'm surprised it has not happened already. We had a meeting with him 2 days between Republican and Democratic leadership that Bob Dole brought him in. But he said the trade deficit is the most worrisome thing that he sees. It could give us all kind of problems. We still have the international debt that's out there. We see savings and loans that are in trouble in states. We see banks that are in trouble. Agriculture is in trouble. As many things that you tell me are on the rosy side, I can tell you there's a lot of gloom out there. And I've been one of the prophets that's been saying it was going to get bad before now. So after a while, you know, it's like I lose my credibility in saying this. I think it is a terrible, terrible tragedy that's hanging over us if we don't deal with the deficit.
Okay. Did I understand you correctly to say that when the budget shakes out in conference, that the cost of living increase that the House provided for Social Security will be struck? It won't be there?
No, I think it will be there. I think I suspect that the House will win on that issue, that the Senate
So there will be a cost of living increase for Social Security?
I think there will under the present plan, because there is no revenue in the plan, because it does not inflict pain across the board. I think it will be.
And as for the Pentagon budget, will that be frozen at its present levels, or will they be allowed an inflationary increase as well?
There will probably have to be some kind of split there. with the Senate at 0 real growth, but a cost of living inflation factor in there. I think given what we're now seeing come out, that our inflation number has been too high for defense over the last years, and this means anywhere from, well, the figures are $18 to $50 billion that defense has had over the last 4 years that they've spent, because of excess inflation. I see us probably splitting off on that.
Okay. The federal deficit, pardon me, is about $200 billion?
That's right.
Okay. The budget, as it's presently drawn, would reduce that by about $56 billion?
Well, the Senate budget, they claimed $56 billion. Those figures are not correct because they're talking about defense being off of the Rose Garden figure, which is what the President wanted for defense a year ago, not what the Congress gave him.
Okay, so
if you take out that, the Congressional Budget Office, which is the impartial scorekeeper, would say that their package is about $34 billion the first year.
Their package, the Republican package?
Yeah, which was passed by the Senate.
Okay. And you think a reasonable figure, a doable figure in terms of budget reduction this session would be what?
Well, I think 50 would be a lot better. 50 would be so much better for the economy. But theirs is 34, and if you take out $8 billion, which is the COLA freeze, you reduce it down into the 20 range. So what I fear is it will come out of conference with the House and the Senate, and the House, and I don't denigrate anything they did. I think they took some very strong steps, but there's some error in their budget too. When you get out, I think CBO is liable to say the first year reduction will be less than $30 billion, and that's a lot of money. And in normal circumstances, with a $200 billion deficit, it's not enough to reduce it.
Tom?
You say that you think the best way to close this gap is to put some revenue in the mix, which is another way of saying to increase some taxes somewhere. Where do you think that can be done without people just screaming, there go the Democrats again?
I think the kind of revenue that we're talking about is like $12 billion the first year, $10 or $12 billion. A minimum corporate tax, closing some of the loopholes now in the minimum personal tax. You can pick up that kind of money right there. Going into any kind of other loophole closings, continuing the cigarette tax that's there, you can do it without doing anything about people's individual tax rates.
Do you have any optimism at all that the President would sign off on this kind of a...
Under what the President has said, and he seems to be more intransigent all the time, he has not indicated any of that. But the President said the troops would never come out of Lebanon. The next day he pulled the troops out. So he's got a way of holding his cards very close to his vest till he plays his hand.
Are you dealing with the same President Reagan that you were dealing with a year ago or 2 years ago? I mean, here's a man who has gone through Bitburg. He's gone through 2 Senate budget committees where he watched his military budget get squeezed. Yesterday, he sees the MX missile number of MX missiles cut in half from what he wants. Is President Reagan becoming more of a paper tiger here?
Oh, well, President Reagan is still a very formidable guy. I don't classify him as a paper tiger. He's still the best communicator I've ever seen. I think he took on too many battles at one time, and he is a lame duck president now. So he probably will not have some of the strengths he had before, but I think he's a very, very strong person. I would not say he's a paper tiger. I think he has a chance to go down in history as the man that turned this deficit around. If he doesn't, he'll go down in history as the man that created this huge thing, because he's gotten away with so far blaming everything on Jimmy Carter and past actions of the Congress. But after all, the deficit did go from about $600 billion to it's going to go to $2 trillion during the short time that he's in there. So it's these huge deficits have occurred on his watch. He has a chance to reverse that if he simply would now get smart and say to the Congress, look, I don't trust you guys. I'm not going to do anything on taxes until you make the spending cuts. They have to go in first. They have to be $2.50 or $3 for every tax cut. You'll have to show that to me. But if you do that, and if that package is big enough that you can show me that we can balance by 90 or 91, I will allow a certain amount of revenues. If he would do that, Congress would buy it in a minute.
But this is fantasizing because you don't think he'll do that.
Well, I'm an optimist, and I think it's so logical that it keeps looking that way to me, and I'm so frustrated because somehow he hasn't seen it yet, or it hasn't been clear to him. I still think that maybe it can happen.
Thank you, Senator. Mark Ledbetter.
Senator, in the week upcoming, the President will pursue a vigorous campaign in behalf of his tax reform package, beginning with his trip to Florida Monday, and then a nationwide address Tuesday night. How do you see all that turning out?
I think there's going to be a major tax reform package. I think what you're now seeing is the Republicans and Democrats vying with each other as to sort of who can get out in front on tax reform. If you'd asked me 2 years ago when Bradley and Gephardt, Democrats, were first talking about tax reform, I would have said at some stage the special interests will get in and they'll shoot with a rifle and they'll start picking away, and after they get in the door and knock out a number of sort of the loopholes that you're trying, or create the loopholes again, then it will all tear apart. But now you've got a different thing. The President has discovered tax reform. He discovered it in the last campaign because he was afraid that Mondale was going to bow on to Bradley Gephardt. Mondale, bless his soul, did not bow on to that. He had to take on a tax increase, and that was perfect for the President. But he started Treasury to work on, give us a crash program on tax reform. That was Treasury 1. Now, Treasury 1 was a real tax reform bill. You notice they've muted that now. The oil people got furious with them and started sending in their Golden Eagle cards where they contribute $1,000 a month to the party. So they had to abandon that, and they've abandoned a lot of the other sort of real gut-rendering sort of reforms. But they still have a major package, and now the fight, the competition will be between Rosenkowski as the chairman of the Ways and Means, between Bradley and Gephardt, trying to say, hey, fellas, we were here first, you know, we started this, and now Jack Kemp sees this looks great for his presidency, so he's got a tax reform bill. So everybody is going to be fighting for it. That tells me there will be a major tax reform. I hope it's a good bill, because better get set, we're going to get one now.
Well, what do you think it'll look like? What difference will it make to the average American family?
Well, I hope it makes some major difference. I hope that it is simpler, and I hope there will be a perception that it's fair. Because what you find now, and this I think is very dangerous for our country, we operate with a voluntary tax system, and the vast majority of people feel they're paying too much and everybody else is getting off, and to the point where I think it's really endangering the fabric of how we collect taxes. I hope it will be those things. I don't happen to be on those committees. They're going to write that, and I can't tell you right now. It looks like, I mean, the contest is to come up with a major tax reform, which means you've got to really reduce individual rates. At the same time, though, you want to be careful, or there are people that want to be careful that you don't alienate whole groups that might kind of vote against you. The Republicans see this as a realignment issue. This is a way of getting them away from the tag they've had throughout their history that they're the party of the rich. And they say, or some of them say, we should take on some of these. Others say, wait a minute, don't take on that group. They're the ones that contribute to us. So it's back and forth, and where it'll end right now, I don't know, other than I think there will be a major bill. The other key part of this, I think, is right now the President says, and the others that have a bill say, it should be revenue neutral. And what they mean is everything that they do, every loophole they close, every minimum tax they pass, should go in reducing people's individual rates. Now what that says is that there will be no money there used to reduce the deficit. Now I think that's the height of folly. I think if you're carrying a $200 billion deficit, and that is the greatest danger to the country, how can you talk about revenue neutral when you're in a war on the deficit? Now, whether something will happen in there at some stage, I don't know.
The consensus of opinion of most of your colleagues from Congress who've sat in that chair has been that no, tax reform, if it happens, certainly won't happen this session. And yet one wonders, in light of the upcoming
now,
events
when they
of
say
this
this
week,
session, are they talking about this year or this session?
I think they meant this year.
Well, the session is 2 years. And I wouldn't want to say that I think for sure it will happen this year. I think it will happen this session. If it doesn't happen this year, it will happen next year.
Okay. You and your other colleagues in the Florida congressional delegation fought hard for Radio Marti, which signed on the air this week. And Castro promptly reneged, canceling an immigration pact with the United States, which would have brought something like 20,000 Cuban refugees from the island to the continental United States. Was it worth the price we paid?
Well, first, Castro has suspended the immigration agreement. He hasn't canceled it. And Castro has suspended things before any time he gets miffed. And obviously, Castro either was caught very much by surprise with the fact that Radio Marti did go on the air, so I think there must have been a lot of controversy in the administration as to whether they were going to put it on or not. It seemed to catch him by surprise because generally, as people tell me, he has that island completely regimented. Every block knows exactly what the party line is to be, what the instruction to be. When Radio Marti came on the air, they were putting it on loudspeakers in Havana. And so, and then they started the jamming, and then they started. So obviously he was surprised. I think you've got to wait, let this thing cool down, and to see. The interesting thing is, The Wire evidently is carrying something today that in an interview with Playboy magazine, and it seems Jimmy Carter's not the only one that talks to Playboy, Castro said in the latter part of March in an interview with them that he would allow Radio Marti to come in, that he was seeking 2 frequencies that he could get international approval to be able to broadcast into the United States, and that would satisfy him. Well, I think we say if you do it legally, if you're not putting some other radio station out of business, welcome. Come in. We'll be delighted to hear from you. You're broadcasting 400 hours a week to Africa, to Central America, to South America. We'll allow you to broadcast here. After all, you did beam Radio Moscow into us for up until the last couple of months when you put it off. So it looks like that was what he was talking about to start with. He used the word in his communique, in the original communique, that he had been betrayed by the United States. Well, the Congress passed this act. It was the law of the land. That sounds like to me that somebody up in the administration or something was saying, don't worry, it's not going to go on the air, and suddenly it went on and caught him by surprise.
Senator,
let's let him cool off.
I understand your analysis. You never know what the man is going to do from moment to moment. That's part of the mystique of his power. But what if? What if he suspends this immigration pact and it remains suspended indefinitely? Will the price be worth it?
Well, I don't think we can allow Fidel Castro or anyone else to lead our foreign policy. I think that what we're talking about in beaming into Cuba is legal. I think it's something that's part of our foreign policy initiative. We shouldn't let him call the tune, and so anything will be worth the price for us to be able to rule our own destiny and not let Castro to do it for us.
Time compels me to call that the final word and say thank you. Lawton Chiles, Senior Senator from Florida, joining us on Florida Forum, along with our panel of Tom Fiedler, political editor of the Miami Herald, and News Center 7's Mark Ludner. Mark Wolin, reporting for News Center 7, thanking you for joining us. See you again next week on Florida Forum.
Florida Forum is an award-winning program dealing with the current events and personalities that affect South Florida, and is produced by the Public Affairs Department of News Center 7.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.